All right, everyone, welcome. If you're prepping for your CUET PG English exam, you are in exactly the right place. We're going to do a super quick lightning fast revision of the Anglo Saxon period. Yep, the very, very beginning of English literature. So let's just dive right in and get you exam ready. So let's start with a big question. Think about it. Way before Shakespeare, even before Chaucer, who were the original storytellers of England? Well, to answer that, we've got to go back in time, like over 1,000 years ago, to the world of the Anglo Saxons. It was a time of fierce warriors, absolutely terrifying monsters, and this deep sense of faith. Okay, first things first, let's get our bearings with this quick timeline. We're talking about a massive period of time, starting from when the Anglo-Saxons settled around 450 AD and stretching all the way to the Norman conquest in 1066. Now, for your exam, just remember these key moments. The 7th century is crucial for both Beowulf and Caedmon's Hymn, and the 9th century is all about the great King Alfred. Think of this as your historical map for the entire period. So here's our game plan. First, we'll look at how these ancient stories even survive to this day. Then, we're going to jump into the 3 main flavors of their poetry: heroic, elegiac, and Christian. And to wrap things up, we'll see how English prose was born, a nice, clear structure to help you organize your notes. Okay, section 1. Before we get into all the epic poems and sad songs, we have to ask a really important question. How in the world do we even have these texts today? I mean, seriously, it's a miracle they survived. Written on fragile animal skin, going through fires, wars, centuries of just being forgotten. And what kind of literary tricks did these storytellers even use? Let's find out. Now, this is a fact that might just blow your mind. Almost all the Old English poetry that we have today, it all comes from just 4, that's right, 4 handwritten books. That is it, 4. You can think of them like these incredible treasure chests preserving these ancient voices for us. Remember that number, 4. It's a classic exam question. And here they are, the legendary 4. You'll definitely want to jot these names down. We've got the Vercelli book, the Nowell Codex, which is super important because it has Beowulf, the Exeter book, which is just full of those sad elegies, and finally, the Junius manuscript. Trust me, knowing which book holds which masterpiece, that's an easy way to grab some extra marks. So what did this poetry actually sound like? Well, forget about AABB rhyme schemes. The Anglo-Saxons were all about alliteration. You know, the repetition of consonant sounds at the start of words like fierce foe or grim and greedy. This was their secret sauce, the absolute backbone of their poetry. And this is where their language gets really, really cool and creative. They used something called a kenning, which is basically a 2-word poetic metaphor. So instead of just saying the sea, they'd call it the whale road. A king wasn't just a king, no, he was a ring giver. It's a bit like how we might call a TV an idiot box, right? It's a super clever way to make the language more vivid. All right, let's see how they used these tools in their most famous type of poetry. Section 2, heroic poetry. Get ready to enter a world of massive battles, intense loyalty, and this really strong belief in fate, or as they called it, word, this idea that every warrior's destiny was already written. And of course, the heart of heroic poetry is the big one, Beowulf. For your exam, you need to lock these facts into your brain. It's anonymous, it's from the 7th century, and it's a massive 3,000 lines long. This is, without a doubt, the single most important work from the entire Anglo-Saxon period. Now, 3,000 lines can sound a bit scary, I know, but the plot is actually pretty easy to remember. Just think of it as 3 epic fights. First, our hero, Beowulf, goes to Denmark and defeats the monster Grendel. Then, he has to deal with Grendel's even scarier, vengeful mother in her underwater cave. And finally, much later, as an old king, he fights and dies taking on a massive dragon. 3 battles, 1 hero. Simple as that. Now, Beowulf is definitely the star of the show, but there are a few other heroic poems that are good to know. Just keep an eye out for names like Widsith, the fight at Finnsburg, and Walderay. You never know, one of them might just pop up in a multiple-choice question. Okay, let's switch gears. We're moving from the battlefield to the lonely thoughts of a person's heart. Welcome to Section 3, Lyric and Elegiac Poetry. This is where we find the really personal, emotional side of Anglo-Saxon literature. Poems about being exiled, about loss, and about living in a pretty harsh and unforgiving world. 2 of the most famous elegies are The Wanderer and The Seafarer, and it's easy to mix them up. So this chart makes it simple. The Wanderer is about an old man who has lost everyone and everything. The Seafarer, on the other hand, is about a sailor who hates the hardships of the sea, but at the same time, he just can't stay away. Two very different kinds of sorrow, right? And this theme of separation and loss is just everywhere. You see it again in The Wife's Lament, which is from a woman's perspective. You see it in Dior's Lament about a poet who's lost his job, and even in The Husband's Message. So you can see the pattern, right? Personal loss is really at the core of this entire genre. And then a huge change happened in Anglo Saxon England. Christianity arrived, and this new faith completely changed the game, bringing in a whole new set of stories and ideas. So in Section 4, we'll look at Christian poetry, which is this amazing mix of their old warrior culture and these new spiritual beliefs. And this is where we meet the first English poet we actually know by name, a man called Caedmon, and his story is just incredible. The legend says he was just a simple shepherd who couldn't sing a note until one night he had a divine dream and was suddenly given the gift of poetry. You have to remember his name, Caedmon, the father of English poetry. So the only poem of Caedmon's that we still have is his hymn, which is the oldest English poem in existence. Then there's Wolf, who was really unusual because he actually signed his poems. And then you have my personal favorite, The Dream of the Rood, which is this breathtaking poem where the cross of Christ is imagined as a loyal, warrior-like tree. It's the perfect example of pagan and Christian ideas coming together. Up until now, it's all been poetry, poetry, poetry. But what about prose? Well, prose was kind of a late bloomer. Let's look at Section 5, the dawn of English prose. What's interesting is that it didn't start as art, but more as a practical tool for education and religious teaching. And the person we have to thank for English prose is the man himself, King Alfred the Great. This guy was a total visionary. He realized that if people were going to learn, they needed books in their own language, in English, not just in Latin. So he started this huge project to translate all the important works. He is 100% the father of English prose. And because of Alfred, we have some really major works of prose. The biggest one is the Anglo Saxon Chronicle, which is basically a year-by-year history of England. We also got the English translation of Bede's famous History, and collections of sermons by guys like Aelfric and Wulfstan, which were used for teaching in churches. All right, here we go. This is your ultimate cheat sheet for the entire Anglo-Saxon period. I want you to pause right here, take a screenshot, whatever you need to do, and just burn this chart into your memory. It has everything you need: the key genres, the major works, the main themes, and the authors. This is your secret weapon for that last-minute revision. Look, if there is only one thing you remember from our little session today, let it be this. In the Anglo-Saxon period, poetry was king. Poetry ruled everything. Prose was important, yes, but it came much, much later. This chart makes that super clear. So, from the terrifying monsters in Beowulf to the lonely, sad voices in the elegies, these were the stories that literally built the foundation of the English language. And that leaves us with one final thought. What echoes of their world, of heroism, of exile, of fate, can we still find in the stories we tell today? Something to think about. Now go and ace that exam. All the very best.